I think this other thing that we do is we tend to hierarchy grief a little bit. Like there are bigger griefs and there are littler griefs, and the bigger griefs are more important. And we tend to do this, like a lot of kind of math and bargaining and hierarchy of like, oh, well, it's not my spouse who's dying, so I'm not entitled to the feelings that I have about this person's illness.
Social worker Bridget Sumser looks to promote connection and well-being to help people living with serious illness. Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is being sponsored by Halo Care. Whether you're supporting an aging parent or planning for your own independence, Halo Care empowers you to live confidently at home. From personal care and home safety to meaningful social connection, Halo Care gives you peace of mind knowing someone's always there. Learn more at halocaregroup.com/USA or check the show notes for the link. Halo Care, where technology meets compassion and home feels like home.
My guest, Bridget Sumser, is the head of practice for Mettle Health. Over the course of the last 10 years, Bridget has worked across various settings, providing support and companionship to patients, families, community members, and providers. She's worked in palliative and end-of-life care for over a decade, which informs who she is and how she shows up as a support and helper in a myriad of ways. Bridget holds dearly the power of transitions, and she looks to unearth untended-to grief and sadness as a means to be more in touch with our own lives and more in touch with awe. In addition to her clinical work, Bridget is a writer and an educator. Her practice is rooted in a commitment to social justice and understanding illness and caregiving within the context of a unique life. You can find Bridget and Mettle Health at mettlehealth.com. This was a fantastic conversation. Bridget and I discussed how the many roles and relationships that a person has can affect the way they grieve their person when he or she dies. Bridget explains that grief doesn't only happen when someone close to us dies, but grief can be experienced after any loss or major change. Part of our discussion focuses on how we grade people's grief based on the type of loss or the relationship that's affected. Bridget calls that kind of grief comparison game the Suffering Olympics. She and I also talked about what people say to grievers, what words to say and what not to say. We also talked about disenfranchised grief and how that affects the work we do as healthcare professionals. This is a great, deep conversation you're going to want to stay with until the very end. So stick with it. There's a lot to learn. Bridget, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you this morning.
You have been very patient because I think we have been negotiating dates and times for about 6 months. So I'm glad to get you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. And you have also been patient, which, is a muscle we have in this space.
Some things are worth waiting for. So I know this is going to be really good conversation.
Sweet.
I'm going to start with an icebreaker question that I did not share with you. Well,
love it.
Well, and of course, I'm such a creature of habit. This is and of course, I love it when my guests know what the end of life deck is.
I was talking to Lisa on a webinar yesterday.
Oh, she's awesome. So I am pulling a card for my listeners who can't see this. I'm pulling a card from the End of Life deck, which was designed by a hospice social worker, a dear friend of mine, Lisa Paul, who is awesome. And there are 3 decks now. The Death deck, which is just a game, really, to get people comfortable about talking about end-of-life issues and concerns and wishes. And then the Dementia deck, which is specifically for folks dealing with neurodegenerative issues at end of life. And then the End of Life deck, which I pulled a card, not aimed at you specifically, but it's still a really good question. So, okay, here's your question. Would there be differences in how your family members would treat your medical condition if you couldn't speak for yourself? So it's a multiple choice. A is no, I've been very clear with my instructions. Or B, they would argue but ultimately agree. Or C, yes, they struggle with choosing a restaurant. Is that a good chuckle or a bad chuckle?
That's just a families are complicated chuckle. I think that if I had to pick a lane, I would pick A. I feel like I do. I feel like I would pick A. I think we talk a lot about this kind of stuff in my house. I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they talk about death and dying more than even I'm comfortable with sometimes. So I think they would land in the right place. And I think maybe why I believe that to be true is because I think everybody understands their roles. So, I'm married, I have a spouse, I have 2 living parents who are divorced. And I think they sort of understand where they sit in relationship to one another in regards to decision making. And I trust them to take care of each other in that process. Not that I think it would be easy, but I think they've heard from me that, yes, my wishes are important and thinking about me is important, but taking care of each other in the process is actually the thing that's most important to me.
Oh, I like that you've made that known to them. I think that's really good.
That feels like they're going to have to, if they were in that position, they are the ones that would be figuring it out together. Wow. So their connection through the process that's actually the thing that's most true to my spirit and my life and how I've lived my life, which is to think about the impact of these things on relationships.
I think that's probably not discussed enough when we talk about end-of-life wishes and advanced care planning.
100%. I think that we really, really, really focus on what would the person want.
Which is good.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's a really essential and important piece of the conversation and the puzzle. And yet, even still, when we keep the focus really, when that is the only focus, we don't sort of hold all the other things that are true, right? Which is that relationships are complicated. They're formed in really different ways with really different meaning across cultures and generations. And one of the things that I remember thinking really clearly when my grandfather was dying, which was before I was in this work. It was really on the eve, and a propeller into this work for me was I was sitting at the foot of his bed in the cardiac ICU at Georgetown. And there was his wife of 60 plus years and 2 adult children, not my parent, and then a in-law. And I was like, I remember looking around thinking, we are all relating. There's 5 different people that we're grieving in this moment: a spouse, a parent, an in-law, a grandparent. And those are decidedly different people. And we're trying to talk about him as if he's one.
Yeah.
Right? Like all of those relationships are in the room and cross-talking and trying to make sense. And, can we hold that and honor it? And can we be just sort of awestruck by the fact that it ever goes well? Because there's so many layers
Absolutely.
of sense making happening. Yeah.
Well, and then when you factor in everybody's grief style,
and the futures they're trying to make sense of, and the pasts that they're reconciling. I mean,
the identity changes that are coming.
There's so many worlds happening in that room in that moment.
Yeah. But I think that's a point worth really looking at, is that when we talk about advanced care planning and end-of-life wishes, we do have a tendency to tunnel vision strictly on the person. And I have seen end-of-life wishes, like funeral planning, memorial planning, things like that, that are out of alignment with what the family finds comforting or meaningful. And so it falls short. When in fact, the person who's dying doesn't intentionally, most of the time, set out to complicate things any further than just the grief that's already there. But, I think people at funerals when you're planning a funeral, say you're doing your own funeral, you think, well, this is the music that I like. This is what I want you to play. Except you're not there to hear it, and maybe that's not meaningful. Maybe sacred music isn't meaningful for your kids or your family. And I think sometimes we forget to remind people or nudge them to say, do you think this would be something that would be meaningful or comforting for your kids or your spouse? And there's nothing wrong with it. I don't think it's selfish, but I don't think there's anything wrong with asking that question either.
No, I don't think so either. I guess one of the ways that I relate to it is we are so focused on independence and autonomy and individuality. And there's a role for that space and essential. And in some people's lives, that's the primary mode, because there aren't close people and there aren't close family members. And so it really is about them and their relationship to their life. But I really kind of try and center the frame of interdependence, right? Or sort of intermingling, which is that my life impacts other lives.
Right.
And I think very personally, when I think about bereavement or grieving or funerals or celebrations of my life, it really feels like it's about the people who are going on.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I won't be there in any form. Who knows? And I feel like working with folks who are mourning and grieving, I spend a lot of time giving permission around including themselves in the planning, right? Especially if they've inherited a really explicit plan about food and music and where and when, and the when actually feels impossible or too painful to wait or to do it very quickly, right? The food actually feels like, wow, I don't, just like, how can we work with the guidance that someone has given and also hold true that you are the facilitator of this experience and it is for you?
Well, it goes back to what we try to teach people is don't make promises you can't keep. Time-wise, ability, emotional bandwidth, financial, all of those
100%.
things.
Yeah. I mean, I really feel like and you probably have a lot of experience thinking about this too, but for both people living with illness and facing the end of their life and for the folks around them, I really think about how do we give each other permission? How do we make commitments or say, I hear you, I will really do my best? And how do we say, this is what I want and this is what I'm hoping for? I really would prefer to not ever be living in a facility. And as the person I've, bestowed this responsibility on to care for me, to make decisions on, or that's the product of our relationship, however that comes to be, I trust that you're going to do the best that you can. I trust that you're going to do the thing that takes care of us both. Just extending that little bit of grace. So when that person is in what feels like an impossible decision, like I said I would keep them at home and I can't keep them at home anymore. It's not safe or sustainable for either of us.
Yeah.
But it's not quite as painful because there's just that little memory of like, great, he said that he trusted me to do this.
Yeah. But those communications, that type and depth of communication, forward thinking like that, I think that's pretty challenging for most people.
It is. And it is challenging. And I will say it is easier when it's facilitated for you. Right.
Well,
it's harder to generate it by yourself, right? When you're like both just really in it. And when somebody else comes in and says, hey, this is what I see is happening. And these are some questions I have and some wonderings I have. It's much easier to sit on the same side of the bench, husband and wife or adult child and parent or friend and say, oh, how do we respond to this question of like, if you make all these plans and they can't happen, how would you want the other person, what would you want the other person to hear from you?
Yeah. Is there a plan B? Can we make a plan B?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Or can we trust that this era is full of the era of illness and aging and approaching our deaths is filled with so much uncertainty that we can do the best planning in the world.
Yeah.
And then, I'm the caregiver and I get my own diagnosis, or I get, pulled in a different direction of someone else who's ill in our life, or a work dynamic that needs my attention equally because I run our family business now, right? Like there's just so many things we can't anticipate. And
yeah, there are too many scenarios to even
100. No, we can't plan or prepare or have the plan Z's for all the things that could.
Can you imagine the mental impact of that? The emotional impact of trying to figure all of that out?
100%. And I think that would be incredibly distracting from the richness that's available to us in the present moment. That becomes the most essential raft and buoy in these times. If we're constantly anticipating, there's a real thin line between when that is helpful and soothing and orienting to preoccupying and distracting.
Yeah. You can feel prepared or it can make you feel overwhelmed. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So caregiving is messy, right?
Yeah.
It's complicated. It's all messy.
Yeah.
It's all messy. So we want to talk today, because I know your specialty is grief. We want to talk a lot today about grief and how it shows up in an experience like this. So with our caregivers, we know that grief before the death is a very real thing, anticipatory grief. What are some of the losses that caregivers experience before that end of that life happens?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I should state my bias from the top, which is I think that all of our lives are filled with lots of griefs all of the time, even if we're not dealing with illness or end of life or caregiving at all.
Yeah.
Right. I think of grief as a reaction to loss. I think of grief as the loss of our assumptive world. And I really love, I hold on to that definition particularly closely because so often I've had this great honor of teaching grief, loss, and bereavement to social work students for many years. And when we start to dive in, so many people are like, I don't know grief because I don't know anybody who's died.
Oh,
right? There's such this high association with grief as bereavement or grief as the reaction to a close death that people really, have no scaffolding of relationship to it. And if grief is actually the loss of the assumptive world, to be honest, no matter where you sit politically, you kind of just have to open up a newspaper and read the headlines, and you could be tapped into a grief response because
sure.
the world is in myriad ways not what most people expected it to be, or the environment that they thought that they would be living in.
Right.
Right. And it feels so important to me to say, like, we've all experienced grief. We can all access that realm. There's grief around almost every major life transition, including really positive ones like becoming a parent or getting married. Like there's change. And so I really like to open up the field so that people can start to access the ways in which they have lived with and felt through and adjusted in their lives to things they didn't expect.
So it happens way before we even. It's a thread that runs through human existence.
It is a companion, potentially from the day we're born, right? Like it's just a piece of being a human being. And I think this other thing that we do is we tend to hierarchy grief a little bit. Like there are bigger griefs and there are littler griefs, and the bigger griefs are more important. And we tend to do this, like a lot of kind of math and bargaining and hierarchy of like, oh, well, it's not my spouse who's dying, so I'm not entitled to the feelings that I have about this person's illness.
It's a competition.
Right? It's a competition. It's like the suffering Olympics. And in the suffering Olympics, right, if I'm not in the closest realm of proximity, then my experience is less important. And then I sort of ignore or feel guilty or shame or judge the feelings I have when in some ways, if grief is this long lifelong companion, the invitation is, instead of judging, to make contact with the things that we feel, to expect them.
It's a continuum. So what do you think in the hierarchy of assigning grief value? What's the worst loss? I have a guess.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I think I don't want to do that.
No?
No, because it feels so unfair.
Yeah.
Every life is so dynamic and nuanced, and all of our orientations and coping mechanisms and belief systems position us differently to experience loss in one way or another. And, I think we do a lot of or I have seen, for example, we do some minimizing around grief that feels chronologically appropriate.
Right.
Like somebody in their late 90s who's had a really full life and has lived a good life and feels okay about their dying and is kind of embracing it, and everyone's around. And we're like, this is right. Yeah. This is the right kind of this is okay. This feels okay to me.
It's lower on the list.
Right. It's lower on the list. That's the default orientation, right? And then you have an adult daughter wailing at the bedside, and you have then this next layer of providers around them that kind of are like, what's happened? But this seems like the dream. Yeah. This is the ideal.
So somehow her grief response is an overreaction.
Right. Then we start doing all of this negotiation or judging or something's wrong, because how can you be wailing over the death of a 97-year-old that was okay to go? And it's I don't know, because human life is complicated and our attachments are rich, and it's really hard to actually imagine a person that has been here for your entire life not being here anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And it would be really easy to say that's an easier loss than the loss of your child. And I would never come into anyone's life and say like anything about where I think their grief should sit. I think what we need is people who show up in our lives and say like, your grief is real in exactly the way that you're feeling it.
Yeah.
In this moment of your life.
Yeah. You know, we in the end of life space and the death space, we talk a lot about grief support and how we get it wrong so much of the time. And all I can say is never start a sentence to a griever with the words "at least."
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because what that means is I'm getting ready to diminish whatever grief emotions you have. But
Yeah.
here is my philosophy that I have recently come to in the last year or so. If anybody offers a grief, any sort of phrasing or support, take it with the grace and the compassion that is hopefully carried with it instead of critiquing. Yeah. You still get to feel how you feel, but understand that it's offered with some sort of support and positive intent, because I think we really do rip people apart about how they provide grief support.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the more generous we can be, the better. And the reality is we have a tremendously, we really lack in grief fluency. Right. We don't know how. It is not baked into our cultural norms, speaking in massive cultural broad strokes. Right. This is not, this would never be true for all people in this country. You know, there's an endless nuance here. But as a society at large, we don't center grief or grief experiences. So we don't have like the musculature really for how to show up for one another in these spaces consistently. And it's been so popular recently to like highlight lists of like all the things you should never do, like never say and never do A, B, and C for somebody who's grieving. And on the one hand, I think there's something profoundly cathartic for the person writing that list to say, these things were not helpful for me, or they caused harm. And at the same time, I think it can be a little fracturing to connection when people's intention is, I care about you. I want you to know that I care about you and I'm thinking about you. And I have no idea what to say other than he's in a better place.
Right. And
look, you can still go throw a dish at the wall every time you hear somebody say that he's in a better place. Like to your point, like the frustration and anger and all the things you feel are just so real. And one of the things I talk to folks about a lot is like, what if you just said like, I don't know what to say and I'm here. I don't know what to say and I wish I did. I just want you to know that I love you. I just want you to know that like, I'm here to figure it out with you.
Well, you know, I've gotten to where I even think the one phrase that we just completely said was hideous. I'm sorry for your loss. Okay. It's offered with support and compassion and grace and kindness. Yeah. And again, you can go home and throw the plate at the wall if that's what you need. Absolutely. So I think it's kind of like a Christmas sweater that you get. Yeah. Everybody gets the sweater, but it doesn't suit everybody. It's not your style. It's not your taste. It doesn't fit well. And that's okay. Yeah. I think grief styles are so different and specific to the individual that so if I gave you a list of that 10 and we both looked at it and I checked off the ones that were meaningful for me, your list that you check off wouldn't match mine. So how it's a moving target. How are people supposed to ever get it right?
Totally. And I think, grief is always looking for a place to come out about something that feels more engageable, right? If you're trying to acclimate to a totally new reality, it's in some ways a clearer channel to get upset or be moved emotionally by something somebody else is doing in that moment that's much more micro, right? And
Right.
the more that we can build our awareness to recognize, like, okay, that is kind of a lame thing to say, I don't love it. And also, I realize that my reaction is partially about something totally else.
Right. It's coming from a different direction.
This is a person who I know loves me. This is a person who picks up my kid from school every day. I know that they're not trying to cause harm. This is providing a channel for feelings that have nowhere else to go otherwise.
Right.
And then I think there is this kind of like 2.0 practice for when we're in the seat of supporting people, which is that when we go to say something, slow it way down. Where did this come from? Why am I saying this? I all of these years in this work, having sat with so many people, I still work with the impulse to say, I'm sorry. I really make it a very strident practice to try and not say I'm sorry. And it's still really hard.
Yeah.
It's not like this is like, oh, you just like, oh, right, we don't say sorry for your loss. And then you stop saying sorry for your loss. It's really baked in there. And we have to figure out, well, what else do I say? And how do I show my care and my love? And how do I show that I appreciate the vastness and the bigness of this moment? And it's tricky.
I like the idea of saying, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you
best.
and I care about you. Yeah.
It's the truest thing because like there aren't great words.
Well,
most
a lot of
the
people
time
are
for this
really
stuff.
uncomfortable trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
They don't want to
so
offend or
hard.
hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
After our sponsor break, Bridget is going to talk about disenfranchised grief experienced by healthcare professionals.
What if aging at home didn't have to mean being alone? At Halo Care, we're redefining what at-home care can be, combining cutting-edge technology with real human compassion. Our 24/7 Care Hub team is always there, offering peace of mind for families, caregivers, and seniors alike. With Halo Care, safety at home comes first. Through smart home technology, wellness monitoring, and personal connection that helps people live independently and confidently. Whether you're a family caregiver, a healthcare professional, or someone looking for extra support to stay at home, Halo Care is here to help. Visit halocaregroup.com/USA or check the show notes for our link, or call 888-247-7102 to learn how Halo Care can make home the safest place to be, because care should always feel personal, human, and connected.
So I want to dig into this a little bit. So we talk a lot about disenfranchised grief, which is a very real thing, because to put it in a nutshell, there is not a Hallmark card for every loss that people experience.
Mm-hmm.
And not every caregiver is taking care of a quote-unquote loved one. Their person might be not even a liked one, might be an ex, an abuser, you name it.
Yeah.
You know, somehow a challenging relationship, a dysfunctional relationship, disconnected, estranged, it runs the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
So why, in your experience, why are certain caregivers at risk for having that type of grief overlooked or unrecognized?
Yeah. I mean, sort of back on this practice of language before we get too much into this, loved one is a phrase I really try not to use.
Yeah.
I've really tried to take it out of my vernacular. And I think loved one shows up often the most in our written, like when we're writing about or, reading things about this experience, like loved one is sort of the deferred category for anyone around a person. And it's so assumptive, right? It's not particularly curious. And it's actually the first move. If I'm not assuming a status of loved one as a supporter, then I have the opportunity to actually learn about how this relationship exists for both people. So it just kind of removes some bias if I'm not assuming loved one-ness. So we think about disenfranchised grief, right? We're thinking about a grief that is not socially recognized. There isn't a clear place in community for that loss or evolving loss to be recognized. And I think it's a really actually more common experience than we realize, and kind of dovetailing with another thing that I think we will get into. I actually think that professional grief is a form of disenfranchised grief.
Now, when you say professional grief, you're talking about end-of-life workers and hospice. That is
anybody in the
true.
healthcare system.
Yeah.
Anyone in the healthcare system. I think even by the phrases that we use, secondary grief, cumulative grief, right? We are footnoting the quality or the importance or the centeredness of that experience of loss. And I actually think it's a form of disenfranchisement.
Yeah. At least it's not your mom.
100%. It's not your body. Yeah. You don't have cancer. I don't have cancer.
At least this isn't your kid.
It's not my child.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it could be my child. Right. So I think that it's a way in which we hierarchy. And I think, God, I think we would just benefit from centering that experience so much. Right. I think that as professional caregivers, wherever you sit in the healthcare system, and I think every single person in the healthcare system is having an experience of grief, even if you do nothing, quote unquote, clinical, but you are just in the field of people's illness, in the field of people's life changing, you are observing and bodying really, really hard life-changing experiences with no place for it to go, clearly, and no entitled space to have feelings about it.
Well, I think it seems to me that every death is relatable, regardless of whether you have kids or whether you have an elderly grandparent that you're close to. Every death is relatable because it's another human being.
Yeah. This is the most, right? Like, we can't separate ourselves. No professional boundary can separate us from what we're seeing, witnessing, holding, responding to.
Yeah.
Because it could be us.
And I don't think we want to completely separate from that.
No.
I
mean, I don't think we can and sustainably stay in the work. And I think we really miss out on something if we do.
Yeah, I do too, to distance ourselves from the impact of that, because truly for me, I think that's where you find the beauty. That's where I have found the beauty in being able to come alongside someone, a person in the family or the caregiver. That's where the beauty is. That's where the depth and the lessons are. Because I haven't worked with a single patient and their caregiver that I didn't learn from.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just such a continuous honor and humbling to be in this work. And I will say that doesn't mean it's like linear. Like, your capacity to stay in the work is linear, and the capacity builds and builds and builds over time.
Oh my gosh.
So, one of which I think we take for granted sometimes, or we just, healthcare is filled with so many tremendously smart, giving, capable, competent people. And I remember, so I had been working in inpatient palliative care for a long time, and I had my first baby, and something started to change in that transition to parenthood for me. Just my sensitivity started to change. I had anxiety in a way that was new for me. So my physiology was changing. Myself as a tool was like really changing, and I managed like pretty okay. And then I got pregnant with my second child. And at that time, my job was in the cancer hospital part of our health system, also doing palliative care, but all focused on the surgical cancer side, which meant a ton of gyn-onc. I couldn't do it. I just totally hit a wall. The immersion of my development as a parent and a mother next to mothers, a lot of mothers with cancer, I couldn't hold it. And it was so confusing because I looked around at all these beloved colleagues and people who are dear friends, and they seemed pretty okay in similar stations of life of me, young kids, right? Like, and they were okay, but I really wasn't. And I had to go.
Yeah. It became overly relatable for you.
Totally. I couldn't distinguish. I couldn't separate as well. And I was doing okay with patients. I wasn't experiencing burnout in terms of, I still felt really engaged in the work and in the care. But the toll was too big on my ability to become the parent I wanted to be and to relate to my children as, built to thrive little beings.
Yeah.
And it was a really hard decision because, it wasn't common. It wasn't normalized to say like, hey, sometimes the developmental moment you're in your own life makes it so you have to change the dynamic of this work.
Yeah.
Right. I had to do a lot of permission giving for myself and to stop comparing my own process to the other people around me that looked like they were in a similar moment, to be like, it doesn't matter if they're okay. I'm not.
Yeah.
I gotta go for a little while
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next question that we wanted to talk about was, what practices have you seen that are most helpful for folks like us who are working in the end-of-life space, palliative care and hospice? What have you found most helpful in honoring those losses while we're continuing to care for other people, our patients, our clients, and for ourselves at the same time?
Mm-hmm. I think we really need space, like storytelling spaces, right? That are maybe not, sometimes we get that when we ritualize losses. We have a weekly IDT where we say the names, or we maybe tell a story or two, or we have a quarterly memorial. Like, I think those things are super important as, standing calendared space holders. And I think there's so much power in the little moments of like getting to share a colleague this moment that just happened at the bedside, or getting to share the story of, how you went home and when you woke up in the middle of the night overheated, you were thinking about X person, right? The more we can share those stories and feel connected in the experiences we're having, I just think there's so much in that. I think also the more we're telling the stories of what we're experiencing and what we're seeing and what we're feeling, the more we find access to humor, like to the funniness, to the, whether that's a dark humor or whether that's a humor that like borders on feeling like, oh, it's not everybody I would tell this story to.
It's slightly inappropriate.
Totally. But there's a lot of really life-giving, funny moments in this space. And the more that we work that muscle with one another, I think the more we start to play with it with patients and families, which is really a balm, can be just an incredible intervention. But I think there's just an intervention in itself for professional caregivers to be able to say, this is grief. This is my grief. I have grief too about this. I'm not going to categorize it as secondary. I'm not going to professionalize it by saying it's cumulative. I'm a person accompanying other people, and I have feelings in myself about what's happening in their lives and the meaning it makes in my own life. So calling things grief and then playing with it through our storytelling, through our humor, through our ritual.
I love it. Okay. We're almost to the end of the time. So there's a question I want to ask you just to get us closed. Tell me, if you were sitting with a caregiver who was experiencing this transition from anticipatory grief to the grief that accompanies an actual death, the actual death.
Mm.
What would you tell them about that change? What guidance would you offer?
Mm. What a beautiful question. I mean, from where I sit these days, one of the most beautiful things I get to say is like, I'm right here with you and I'm going to be here with you. And the other piece is I have such an extraordinary faith in human beings' ability to adjust and adapt to realities that feel unfathomable to them. And I really hold that so close. Like, I know you believe that you can't do it or that you won't make it or that this will be too painful, but I know in my bones that most likely you're going to figure it out. It's going to evolve and you will find okay-ness again. And if we just kind of like take a leap of faith or have some hope or some trust in that, even if it's blind trust, even if it's like, wow, I'm really faking it till I make it here, then can we just come back to right now? Because this is what's happening. Your person is still here. Tomorrow will come and the next day will come. And there can be a balm in time and you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're focusing on, I know you can do this, then refer back to the first part. I'm here with you now and I'll still be with you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great advice.
And we got right now, right? Like we bypass the present moment so much because we're scared, because we have so much to manage, because the future is unimaginable. And it makes a ton of sense. And sometimes we need good distraction, like, oh my God, I've been sitting vigil for 24 hours. I need to go pee. I need to get up. Like, I need to feel my own breath. We need some break or some distraction. And there's so much available. It's like really in the present moment where there's that beauty, where there's the awe, where there's the respite of like, this is happening and I do feel a sense of okayness because I feel my butt on the chair and I feel you holding my hand and there's a breeze and the light, all of the sensory input of present moment that really provides some respite and some okayness, even in the face of the last thing we ever wanted to have happen.
I love it.
It's not to minimize the bigness at all. It's just to say there's little possibilities of okayness in the face of really hard things.
Little possibilities of okayness. Perfect.
Yeah.
Bridget, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Sharing
what a
your
treat.
wisdom. What a great conversation.
Yeah, agreed. Let's do it again.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.